It's Ash from Super Videos, back for another video for season 11 of The Walking Dead. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a brand new theory that has to do with Carol possibly taking on a very critical and important storyline from the comic book that involves the Commonwealth. Before we get into it, if you have not read the comics, you probably don't want to watch this video because I will go through a very important point in the story that's going to be coming up in season 11 if they go ahead and follow the arc completely. So if you watch this video, it will spoil it for you. Stay tuned, we'll be right back to break this theory down. Alright, as always, before we jump into this, smash that like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. If any of the shows on the left interests you, then you definitely want to stick around and subscribe because those are the shows that I react to or I cover in depth on the channel. All the links to my social media pages is also down below and in the description, so make sure to follow me in any of those. With that said, let's dive right in. So obviously we're talking about the Rick Grimes and Sebastian storyline, specifically from the Commonwealth comic book arc. Now, for the longest time, I've been on the boat that thinks that the Rick Grimes comic story, which led to his death, doesn't necessarily work in the TV adaptation with the way things are at this point, with Rick not being around and with everything that's going on. But I'm beginning to kind of see them setting up the pieces of the puzzle to come together for that arc to work in the TV adaptation, possibly more smoothly than I thought it would. I also have been theorizing that they could potentially remix the Rick Grimes comic arc, the story that had to do with Rick, Sebastian, and also Dwight, and give it to characters like Gabriel and Aaron. I've done some videos on that, but looking at the official season 11B trailer and some of the images that they've released, I've kind of been thinking that maybe they are gonna go a possibly different direction, a direction that involves Carol and Sebastian and maybe one other character. Daryl is even possibly gonna be involved to an extent. So in this video, I'm gonna pretend like they're actually gonna do it and think about how the different pieces of the puzzle can come together for Carol to be able to take on that story. Now, I'm not saying Carol is gonna take Rick's arc, but we'll get to that. Let's go one step at a time. Obviously, based on the images that they released, it appears that Carol is putting on a persona. She's faking who she really is. She's baking cookies and she's making the Commonwealth, specifically the leaders, think that she's this nice old lady, but at the same time, we know what she's capable of. She's pretty much putting on the same act that she did when they first got to Alexandria. So, why is that important? I think that this is Carol's way or strategy, a strategy that she's used many times to be able to find vulnerabilities within the Commonwealth, to see what they're all about and who they really are. That fits in perfectly with Dwight. In the comics, it was Dwight that saw through the BS and saw what the Commonwealth was all about. And I think that Carol can potentially take on this arc. She could figure out what is really happening and she could take an extreme measure to try to stop it by threatening to murder the leader, Governor Pamela Milton, just like Dwight did in the comics. We know that Carol has this in her to be able to pull the trigger and act when she realizes what's actually going on and when she's confident in her decision. And here is where they could remix the story slightly more, because in the comics, Lance Hornsby wasn't really a big part of that story. Yes, he was there and he did have some sort of a role in the story that played out with Rick and Sebastian and all of that, but in the TV adaptation, especially looking at the trailer, it looks like Lance Hornsby is gonna be a much more sinister character. He's gonna be a cliche corrupt politician or cliche someone who does everything to stay in power or something to that effect. So what I think could potentially happen is once this happens and Carol threatens Pamela Milton and we go through all of that story, what we could end up seeing is a situation where Sebastian is ordered by Lance Hornsby, or not necessarily ordered, but he's advised, or maybe Lance Hornsby is trying to influence him or something to that effect, for Sebastian to go through with killing Carol. Obviously that would mean that how that falls back into the comic storyline is Sebastian is going to go through with it just like he did in the comics by murdering Rick, but obviously it'll be Carol and not Rick. I think that'll be super interesting. Obviously this means Carol is gonna die, which is huge, and again, we know that there's a spin-off with Carol, so unless that was a lie or it's gonna be flashbacks or something, I don't know necessarily if this is gonna work, but maybe AMC pulled off the greatest lie of all time by telling us that Carol and Daryl are gonna be in a spin-off, but one or maybe even both get killed by the end of the series. So with that said, a question that many of you are asking is, isn't that a combination of a remix of both Dwight and Rick's story? Yes, it is. This means that they're gonna give Dwight and Rick's story both to Carol. So instead of having someone murdering Carol when she threatens to kill Pamela Milton, it'll play out slightly differently, where she threatens the leader and maybe nothing necessarily happens right away, which would be a great way to throw fans off. But then later on, we see the other part of the story play out with Sebastian going after Carol and murdering her. And the other thing I do want to mention, which ties into this, is what role is Mercer going to play? I think that Lance Hornsby is potentially going to go to Mercer to set this whole thing up with Sebastian, and I think that Mercer's conscience is not going to allow him to do that, and he's going to refuse. But then when Mercer sees what ends up happening and that Lance went behind Mercer's back and did what he was going to do anyway, and what it led to, I think Mercer is going to begin to side with the survivors and help them in putting a stop to the rotten and corrupt way of the way that the Commonwealth is set up and the way that it works. But with all of that said, I'm definitely interested to know everyone's opinions about this theory. As far as I know, no one's really came up with this theory quite like this. So as far as I know, I'm the first to bring it up. But if anyone else has said something similar, let me know. But I'm interested to know your thoughts. What are your thoughts about this theory? Do you think that it could work? And do you think it's a better remixed version of what they did in the comics? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Smash that like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video.